12 years ago, when I was 34, I had achieved many things in the city's criminal police force. 2 years later, I had the opportunity to be promoted to deputy captain, but Captain Gao Dan unexpectedly recruited an intern from the police academy. That young man's name was Yang Rui. He was mixed in among the swaying old policemen. He was quiet, with low eyebrows, looking like a schoolboy who accidentally walked into an adult party. Only Gao Dan and I were the ones who watched the whole process of his reputation. When the case had just ended, Captain Gao called him into the office and talked for more than 3 hours. At that time, I called him Xiao Yang. Now I call him Deputy Captain Yang. That case was really strange. On the night of March 8, a heavy rain accompanied by hail hit the northern part of the city. At 9 a.m. the next morning, the team received information from the police. An unidentified female body was found in the northern suburbs. Her death was so tragic that the reporter was scared to the point of losing his spirit. The body was hidden in the bushes, more than 20 meters away from the dirt road. The heavy rain the night before had caused a landslide, revealing part of the red shoe that the reporter had discovered. However, the heavy rain had erased many traces on the body, and the muddy road made it impossible to take footprints, so the number of clues collected was very limited. The female body was wearing cotton clothes for pregnant women. The clothes were covered in blood, lying on the ground with a clear strangulation mark. Captain Chow apologized and lifted the body's shirt. Only then did we clearly see that the abdomen had been slashed lengthwise by a sharp knife, and the fetus in the abdomen was missing. Seeing this horrifying scene, even though it was early spring, I was cold and sweating profusely. But Xiao Yang was calmer than expected. Through investigation, there was no murder weapon at the scene, nor was there any information to identify the body. 12 years ago, technology was not as developed as it is now. Fingerprints, DNA data, and the SkyEye system were not yet complete, so we could only use the most basic methods, identifying the body's characteristics and checking the missing person report. The body was a woman in her 30s, white skin, who appeared to be a housewife. In her shirt pocket was a washed receipt, which I had difficulty reading. It was a receipt for dog skin ointment, a box of 6 pills, and a small bottle of polyvinyl alcohol, half of which was used. With so little information, identifying the body became very difficult. Xiao Yang asked, "Mr. Ha, is she an accountant?" His words stunned me. He pointed to the polyvinyl alcohol bottle and explained, "This is artificial tears, commonly used to improve dry eyes. Dog skin ointment has the effect of relieving pain and increasing blood circulation, but pregnant women should not apply it to the back and abdomen." If the victim bought it for herself, when collecting evidence, I smelled a faint scent of rum oil on her right hand and sleeve. Yang Rui concluded that based on the age of the deceased, who also suffered from dry eye syndrome, cervical spondylosis, and tendinitis, the victim was most likely an accountant. Of course, he added, this is just speculation. Xiao Yang's speculation was a bit bold, because just based on some symptoms, deducing the identity of the body as female could easily affect the way the case was handled. I felt that he had observed many other things, but he only said part of it, clearly leaving a way out. Surprisingly, 4 days later, an old woman came to report that she could not contact her daughter-in-law. The missing person was named Yao Ting, 28 years old, 36 weeks pregnant. Occupation, accountant for a real estate corporation. At almost the same time, an abandoned newborn baby was found 3 kilometers away from the crime scene. The premature baby, small in body, was wrapped in cotton blankets and linen. The body was clean. After comparing the DNA, it was discovered that this was Yao Ting's lost fetus. When the old woman was notified to identify the body, Yao Ting's husband hurriedly returned from afar. He was a small contractor, taking a job in another district. After the Lunar New Year, he had only called his wife twice. At first, the old woman planned to move to the city after Tet to take care of her daughter-in-law who was about to give birth, but unfortunately she broke her back. By the time she finished her housework, she could no longer contact Yao Ting. Yao Ting's husband was 8 years older than her, with a dark face like someone who worked hard, and his hands were full of calluses and scars. He bowed his head and covered his face, tears streaming through his fingers. What happened? Everything was fine during the Lunar New Year. I just went out to take care of some things, and when I came back, she was missing? The baby was gone too. What's going on? What's going on? This question hit everyone hard. The autopsy report showed that Miao Ting died between 8 and 10 p.m. on March 8. There were large bruises on her hands and biceps. She had taken sleeping pills before she died. The cause of death was suffocation. The murder weapon was not a hard object like a rope or a belt, but a soft fabric like a scarf or a long scarf. There were undigested strawberries in Miao Ting's stomach. I took the crime scene as the center, expanded the investigation area to 6 kilometers, and found a newly opened strawberry garden. The owner there confirmed that on the day of the incident, Miao Ting was with 2 other people. One was a crippled man and another woman who was also pregnant. The 2 women talked almost the entire time. The man sat on a horse, picked strawberries, and brought water to them. They looked very happy. After 6 hours, the 3 of them left without having dinner. Captain Gao tapped on the blackboard full of notes. These 2 people must be Miao Ting's friends. Why did they leave her alone in the suburbs? Did something happen that made Miao Ting get off the car? Or did those 2 people plot to kill her? No matter who the murderer was, the top priority was to find these 2 people. Miao Ting's phone was lost, her husband was busy at the construction site and did not know his wife's social circle, so we could only start from the real estate company to investigate those who had close relationships with her. Not long after, a young couple became the target of the investigation. The man named Lee Guangji, 31 years old, is a real estate consultant, working with Miao Ting but in a different project department. Due to work, the 2 often contacted each other. According to colleagues, Lee Guangji is a kind person, once gave Miao Ting a bottle of artificial tears because she knew she had dry eye syndrome. The woman named Yao Ting, she is 28 years old, currently unemployed at home. Lee Guangji was born into a poor family, while Yao Ting came from a Yao Ting came from an intellectual family. The 2 of them had studied at the same school. Lee Guangji was 1 year older than Yao Ting. He was tall, handsome, gentle, and friendly, so he was always liked by girls, and there were quite a few who pursued him. Yao Ting and Lee Guangji met each other while camping. Lee Guangji helped Yao Ting set up the tent, and took good care of her all night, and from then on they had feelings for each other. When Xiao Yang and I arrived at the door, only Lee Guangji was home. He was limping on one leg, his right hand was bandaged, and he was cooking. When I opened the door, I saw him holding a kitchen knife that was shining under the light, which made me a little scared. After letting us in, Lee Guangji went back to the kitchen and closed the door. Without any formality, I asked him directly about his schedule on March 8. Lee Guangji was good-looking, perhaps because of the nature of his work. He always had a friendly smile. On International Women's Day, I took Tingting and Xiao Miao to the strawberry garden. We left around 1 p.m. That day was quite busy. We didn't arrive until after 3 p.m. and played until sunset. I asked, "You 2 went back to the city together?" Lee Guangji shook his head. Xiao Miao went out to have dinner at a farm. Suddenly received a call to work overtime from a big order. The client also urged me to sign the contract, so I had to go to the project to collect documents. Xiao Miao didn't want to disturb my work, so she took a taxi back by herself. I frowned. Miao Ting is pregnant, how can you leave her alone in the suburbs like that? Lee Guangji laughed awkwardly. I know it's not good, but Xiao Miao's house and the project are in 2 different districts, so I can't take her with me. Besides, it's not far from where she got off the car to her house, and it's not too much trouble to take a taxi. If I'm not in a hurry, I'll definitely be polite to her. After dropping Miao Ting off, Lee Guangji took Yao Ting into the city. Yao Ting went home by herself, while he drove to the construction site and was busy until almost 10 o'clock at night. Since he might have been drinking while with the client, Lee Guangji didn't drive home but took a taxi to a prearranged nightclub, where he drank until early morning. He was afraid that he would wake Yao Ting up when he got home, so he rented a room at a nearby hotel and slept until the next morning before returning home. Who would have thought that Ting Ting thought I was secretly having fun and drinking? Lee Guangji said bitterly. There were indeed a few girls that day, but I didn't do anything. There was just a little perfume on my clothes. Din Din covered her face and cried loudly, then argued with me, then angrily packed her luggage and returned to her parents' house, and has not returned yet. At this moment, the clue seemed to have been broken. Xiao Yang suddenly spoke up, "Mr. Lee is good at taking care of flowers, isn't he?" Both Lee Guangji and I were stunned. He reacted faster than me, glanced at the flower pots next to the coffee table and said that it was just a personal preference. As soon as I entered the house, I noticed that there were several flower pots and 2 empty pots next to the coffee table, among which the clivia pot was especially prominent. On the thick leaves were bright red flower buds. The soil was still fresh and moist, clearly newly replaced. Xiao Yang nodded, his expression unclear. "Clivia doesn't bloom easily. The flower buds in this pot are so beautiful, they must have been carefully cared for many years." I was about to interrupt, but Xiao Yang added another sentence. "If you take such good care of it, you must know that you shouldn't change the pot during the bud stage, right?" A sentence that gave me goosebumps. I suddenly remembered what Miao Qing's husband said, that she had a silk scarf, warm in winter and cool in summer, and the price was reasonable. She loved to use it. After she passed away, the scarf disappeared. Before Lee Guangji could react, I reached out to dig up the soil, and sure enough, I found a piece of cloth that hadn't burned completely. At the same time, Xiao Yang stood up and walked towards the kitchen. Lee Guangji hurriedly blocked the way, jumped to stop Xiao Yang, and wouldn't let him in, the reason being that the range hood was broken, and the kitchen was full of oil smoke. I put on my gloves and told Xiao Yang to rush forward. Lee Guangji couldn't fight a police academy student. With just a few moves, Xiao Yang could push him back onto the sofa. I pointed at him and shouted, "Be honest," making him tremble. A few minutes later, Xiao Yang found a set of kitchen knives. The knives were well preserved and could be used to verify the user's identity. The only thing missing was a bone knife. Xiao Yang looked at me, and I looked at Lee Guangji with a pale face, without saying a word. It was not difficult to bring Lee Guangji back to the police station, but asking Yao Ting to help with the investigation was not simple. Yao Ting's father, Yao Changyuan, was a university professor, and her mother, Meng Huiqin, ran a beauty salon for women. Although they were not rich, their family had some power. Knowing that we came for Lee Guangji, Yao Changyuan immediately turned away. Meng Huiqin was wiping a family photo of the 3 members of the Yao family. Her attitude was a little better, and she explained that Yao Ting had not been able to sleep recently, had to take medicine, and was currently resting. I asked Meng Huiqin to wake Yao Ting up. Yao Changyuan suddenly threw down the newspaper in his hand. "Do you want my daughter to assist in the investigation?" "To assist? Wait for her to wake up. If you arrest someone, bring the arrest warrant here." Meng Huiqin arranged things properly, asking to wait half an hour for Yao Ting to wake up. This request was not too much. Yao Ting was at home, and she was pregnant. Xiao Yang and I were guarding the door, so nothing would happen. Meng Huiqin told the maid to make tea. She cleaned up the small things on the low table and invited us to sit down. I glanced at the medicine box she had just put away, suddenly feeling that something was wrong. It was a box of diazepam, also known as diazepam, which is mainly used to treat anxiety disorders and other neurological problems, and is especially effective in treating insomnia caused by anxiety. I asked unconsciously, "Is this what Yao Ting is taking?" Meng Huiqin was stunned for a moment, then nodded. Xiao Yang quietly said, "Isn't Miss Yao pregnant?" Meng Huiqin was even more confused. "Ting, is she pregnant?" Xiao Yang and I looked at each other, immediately alert. Diazepam is a drug that should not be used during pregnancy. If the Strawberry Garden manager could recognize that Yao Ting was a pregnant woman, Meng Huiqin would definitely never give her this drug. After asking carefully, we learned that as soon as Yao Ting graduated, she and Lee Guangji secretly registered their marriage without telling their families. Because of this, Yao Changyuan almost severed his father-daughter relationship with her. But not long after, Yao Ting announced her pregnancy. Meng Huiqin could not bear to see her daughter suffer, so she persuaded Yao Changyuan to put aside her prejudice, held a wedding banquet for the couple, and gave them a house and a car as a dowry. Who could have guessed that when Yao Ting was 5 months pregnant, Lee Guangji drove drunk and caused an accident while traveling together, causing Yao Ting to miscarry. She suffered injuries to her lower body and part of the nerve in his right leg was necrotic. After more than a year of recuperating at home, Lee Guangji still did not fully recover, losing his stable job. 5 years have passed, but they still have not had any more children. Now I understand why Yao Changyuan's attitude was so negative. He did not want his daughter to get into trouble because of Lee Guangji. This thought became even more certain when I saw Yao Ting. The woman who was helped down the stairs by Meng Huiqin had a slender figure, a pale face, and long hair that framed her face, creating a special charm. She had dark circles under her eyes, and was wearing a white dress, fragile as if it could be blown away by the wind. Looking at that slender figure, even a fool would understand, she definitely couldn't be pregnant. Yao Ting's appearance complicated the case. Why did she pretend to be pregnant on March 8? I keenly realized that the answer to this question might be related to Miao Qing's death. In a bad mental state, Meng Huiqin offered to accompany Yao Ting there. When I returned to the team, I saw an ambulance rushing towards me with flashing lights, so I stopped a colleague to ask. He sighed, Miao Qing's family has come to take the body of her granddaughter back for burial. Captain Gao has taken them to identify the body. The old lady saw the child's condition and had high blood pressure and fainted on the spot. Forensic Dr. Lin requested that she be taken to the emergency room immediately. What? Before I could finish my sentence, Yao Ting exclaimed. I looked back and saw her staring at my colleague with a pale face, her whole body trembling. Dead. Dead? Before we could react, she had already fainted. Xiao Yang quickly supported her with his hands and his agility, and we rushed her to the medical room. Luckily, Yao Ting was young, otherwise I would have had to run away from the police station and chase after the ambulance. After stabilizing Yao Ting, I hurriedly returned to the observation room with a sweaty face. As soon as I opened the door, I saw Captain Gao standing with his arms crossed, his face dark as he stared into the interrogation room through the one-way glass. I took 2 steps forward and saw Lee Guangji actually talking to the interrogator about what kind of apartment is suitable for raising a child. The interrogation room was bustling, while the observation room was like an ice cellar. I asked in confusion, Captain Gao, what's going on? Captain Gao's face looked as if he had swallowed a fly. Don't you know? I've been fooled. When Xiao Yang and I arrived at Yao's house, all the evidence related to Lee Guangji had been sent for examination. While waiting for the results, my colleagues used the old methods to approach Lee Guangji, chatting about everyday things in order to find new clues. No one expected that this method would be fooled by a real estate salesman. Lee Guangji quickly took the initiative, skillfully avoiding the topic of the incident and steering the conversation in another direction. Captain Gao did not stop his colleague, just wanting to see how far this guy could go. He is very excited. Xiao Yang walked closer to the one-way mirror, looking at Lee Guangji who was talking non-stop. He feels like a winner when he takes control of the situation. Captain Gao nodded, so young and yet so difficult to deal with. Calling his colleague in, Captain Gao began to expose Lee Guangji. He relaxed his body, leaned back in his chair, turned his head to look at the one-way mirror and smiled mysteriously. It was hard to know what that smile was hiding. I only saw that he was very calm. If the interrogation room only showed that Lee Guangji was difficult to deal with, then the preliminary examination of the evidence raised the level of difficult to troublesome. The fabric fibers in the basin were a mixture of cotton and linen, the type of fabric commonly used to make large square towels. However, they were burned beyond recognition, and no authentic information could be extracted. The missing bone knife was found at the community garbage station, with a chipped blade and 3 sets of fingerprints belonging to Lee Guangji, Yao Changyuan, and Meng Huiqin on the handle. However, the knife had been wiped clean, with no trace of Miao Qing's DNA left. Lee Guangji's white Toyota Vios had also been thoroughly cleaned, and the interior had been completely replaced. Although Miao Qing's hair was found under the rear seat carpet, there was no luminol reaction in the car. All the evidence was not enough to convict. However, on the evening of March 8, Lee Guangji had a period of disappearance. The construction site where Lee Guangji worked was still under construction, with only a small marketing center on it, and no security guards or surveillance system, so it was impossible to determine his entry and exit times. Lee Guangji's computer hard drive was damaged and could not be restored, and the time the computer was used could not be determined. At around 10 a.m. on March 9, neighbors saw Lee Guangji driving into the parking lot of the residential area. No one knew what Lee Guangji did from 6:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. that night. Facing the evidence board, Captain Gao's temple twitched. Impossible, it's impossible that there were no traces left. I read the report over and over again, thinking of Miao Qing's husband's tear-stained face. How could there not be traces of such an obvious scarf, the murder weapon, or Lee Guangji's empty time? After sending Miao Qing's husband off, I closed my eyes and tried to recreate the situation on the night of the murder. That day, Lee Guangji first sent Yao Ting back to the city, and then looked for Miao Qing. Maybe they had made an appointment or he had just contacted Miao Qing, and for some reason they met in the northern suburbs. There was no financial dispute between Miao Qing and Lee Guangji, but it was unclear whether there was an emotional dispute. Miao Qing's husband had been away for many years, and Lee Guangji was tactful and warm, which obviously made Miao Qing feel good about him. The fact that he was married also lowered Miao Qing's guard. The car accident 5 years ago probably caused either Yao Ting or Lee Guangji to lose the ability to have children. No matter who was affected, it affected Lee Guangji's attitude towards pregnant women. But pretending to be pregnant was nothing compared to the real thing. Miao Qing got into Lee Guangji's car, drank the drugged drink, and fell asleep. Lee Guangji probably just wanted to rape Miao Qing. If he was infertile, the semen would not be able to be tested for DNA. As long as he was careful, there would be no evidence left. But due to physical reasons or insufficient drug dosage, Miao Qing woke up early. The two argued, and in desperation, Lee Guangji used a silk scarf to strangle Miao Qing. Her death reminded Lee Guangji of the car accident that almost took his life 5 years ago and the helplessness of being controlled by fate. He found a secluded place to dump the body, pulled Miao Qing's hand up, moved the body into the bushes, and brought a bone cutter with him in case of emergency. As Xiao Yang said, Lee Guangji enjoyed the feeling of being in control of the situation. 5 years ago, a car accident had taken away his and Yao Ting's child, and also taken away their dream of a family of 3. 5 years later, on that uncontrollable night, he had the chance to regain control. The surgery to remove the fetus and keep the baby's life in his hands had restored his lost confidence. He wrapped his child in a silk scarf, left the northern suburbs, changed out of his bloody clothes, and brought the prepared documents to the bar to create an alibi. Looking at Yao Ting's reaction, she clearly didn't know that Miao Qing was dead, but when she saw Lee Guangji bringing home a bloody baby, she realized that something was wrong. The two had a big argument, and Yao Ting went back to her parents' house. She didn't know whether to report her husband or not, and was tormented by fear day and night, to the point of taking sleeping pills. Lee Guangji was home alone, with plenty of time to process the evidence. I opened my eyes, grabbed the photo of Miao Qing and the dead child. No matter what I missed, the breakthrough must be in Yao Ting. I have to go to the medical station. Xiao Yang said, I want to talk to Lee Guangji. Although Captain Gao was here and it wasn't his turn, I was so worried that I choked up. You have no experience, and you know that guy is a cannibal, but you still gave him a chance. If he finds out that we don't have any evidence, it will be even more troublesome to go to court. Xiao Yang was not angry, he just said, I want to know why he did that. What else? He is a psychopath. Captain Gao, please be careful, don't let the low-level students ruin the case. Having said that, I turned and walked to the medical room without waiting for Captain Gao to speak. Yao Ting had already woken up and was answering the questions of the female police officer who came with Jiaming. My colleague and I changed shifts, brought a chair to sit next to Yao Ting and went straight to the point. Tell me clearly, what happened on March 8? Yao's eyes were red, she lowered her head and remained silent. Just as Meng Huiqin was about to say something, I signaled her to be quiet and placed the photo in front of Yao Ting. The two lifeless faces in the photo made Yao Ting scream and rush into Meng Huiqin's arms. Meng Huiqin angrily asked me how I could do that, but I just looked at Yao Ting. Miao Qing's due date is today. She should have been anxiously waiting for the baby to be born with her husband and mother-in-law. She had already given the baby a nickname, Duo Duo, which means blessed, long-lived and lucky. But now, Miao Qing and the baby are in a freezer at -15 degrees, which is not even the coldest spot in the city. Meng Huiqing comforted Yao Ting and said that this matter had nothing to do with her daughter, and asked me not to bother the patient anymore. I ignored her, pointed at the photo and said loudly, Miao Qing is the same age as you, likes children like you, and likes strawberries like you. She may have eaten strawberries many times, but her life has stopped forever at the age of 28. I just want to know what happened on the day she opened her eyes. Yao Ting looked at me in shock, her eyes red as if swept by a storm. We went to the strawberry garden to play until it got dark. I asked, what happened after that? We originally planned to go to a farm for dinner, but the agency suddenly received a call from an urgent client who wanted to sign a contract. He had to go to the construction site to get documents. Miao Qing didn't want to hinder his work, so she said she could take a taxi home herself, and we broke up. Yao Ting answered every question, but I always felt that something was wrong. I asked again. The answer was still the same. This couldn't be right. Under normal circumstances, everyone has different perspectives and focuses due to their own experiences and personalities. Therefore, when describing the same event, even if they have the same storyline, the details will be different. However, Yao Ting and Lee Guangji's testimonies are almost identical, with only a few points of contradiction. I have a bad feeling Lee Guangji and Yao Ting had reached an agreement beforehand. When and under what circumstances did they reach an agreement? When I was about to start with the story of pretending to be pregnant and Lee Guangji's unusual sensitivity to pregnant women, the female police officer who had led the two in earlier approached Yao Ting and whispered something into her ear. Not only Meng Huiqing and Yao Ting, but I was also stunned, immediately pulling the policewoman aside to ask what happened. The policewoman looked at Yao Ting with a vague gaze and said, "She is a murderer, Lee Guangji has protected her forever." A green lightning flashed in my eyes. I turned back to the observation room, only to see Captain Gao there, sitting opposite the one-way mirror, his face darkened. Xiao Yang stood there, raised his chin and asked, "Is there anything else?" I turned back to see the photos scattered on the floor in the interrogation room. Most of them were photos of unrelated people being investigated when investigating Miao Qing's social relationships. Only one photo in particular attracted attention. It was the scene of a female victim having her throat slit in another case. The photos were bloody and horrible. Lee Guangji lowered his head, clenched his hands, and his knuckles turned white. Captain Gao said that when I rushed to the infirmary, he agreed to let Xiao Yang talk to Lee Guangji, but he had to wear a communication device and follow instructions throughout the process. Xiao Yang asked for a stack of photos and entered the interrogation room. When he saw Xiao Yang's special device, Lee Guangji immediately understood that he was being monitored. For Lee Guangji, deceiving veteran police officers was a small matter, so he was confident that he could easily deal with a young man like Xiao Yang. Underestimating the enemy was the first move Xiao Yang made against Lee Guangji. After talking for a while, Lee Guangji learned that Xiao Yang had just graduated from the police academy. He smiled and told Xiao Yang not to be nervous and promised to cooperate with the investigation. Xiao Yang showed Lee Guangji each photo, asking about his relationship with each person. The conversation dragged on boringly for nearly 5 minutes. Captain Gao couldn't help but order Xiao Yang to get straight to the point. He was a little flustered and searched for the photo. Every action caught Lee Guangji's eye. Xiao Yang took out the photo of the deceased woman and asked, "Do you know Miao Qing?" and showed it to Lee Guangji. Perhaps because he was completely caught off guard by the foolish young man, Xiao Yang, or was dazzled by the photos, Lee Guangji only glanced at it, then his expression changed dramatically. He immediately turned away and didn't want to look anymore. Captain Gao also realized what Xiao Yang wanted. Lee Guangji didn't know how Miao Qing died, and now he was strongly against facing the corpse. One siege was broken, but another siege remained. Xiao Yang took the photo and gave it to Lee Guangji. The top photo was the scene of the death. You told a seemingly coherent story, now I will give you a story in return. Xiao Yang's story completely overturned all my previous assumptions. On March 8, he received a call to work overtime and separated from Miao Ting in the northern suburbs. But the person who took the taxi was not Miao Ting, but him. As a gentleman, he insisted on leaving the car with the two women so they could return to the farm. After dinner, he took a taxi to the company to work. After finishing, he stayed at the hotel all night. When he returned home the next morning, he saw a very strange scene. Yao Ting was holding a newborn baby girl. Because Yao Ting relied on you, many people believed that you arranged for her to fake a pregnancy. But that was not the truth. After the car accident, you still couldn't have children. Who had the problem? Of course, I was leaning towards you. Yao Ting became more and more obsessed with having children, even pretending to be pregnant. Perhaps to protect her spirit or out of guilt, you accepted this unreasonable trouble and took good care of her until you saw a child of unknown origin. This case is not rare. There have been many cases of women pretending to be pregnant, wanting to have real children and enjoying the birth process so much that they would attack pregnant women. You may not know about these cases, but you know that Yao Ting is not pregnant, and saw the blood on her clothes and the knife. You immediately drove to the northern suburbs to look for Miao Ting, but our police had blocked it off, you couldn't enter. When he got home, he looked at Miao Ting's bag left in the car, remembered that she and her husband lived apart and had little contact, and realized that it would take time for us to confirm the identity of the body. This gap of time was enough for him to carry out the perfect plan. Faced with an unstable wife, Lee Guangji was confident that only he could solve this big problem. He immediately arranged for Yao Ting to return to her parents' house, arranged for her to give a statement to 3 members of the Yao family, and then began to create false evidence. Lee Guangji burned the bloody silk scarf he used to wrap the baby and buried it in a potted plant. He even used the excuse of arguing with his wife to smash the car window in anger, drove the bloody car to the repair shop and demanded a thorough cleaning, destroying the bloody seat and steering wheel. At the same time, he destroyed the computer hard drive, erased all traces of the previous night's work, and found an opportunity to throw away Miao Ting's bag and the body of the newborn baby. Lee Guangji knew that leaving the baby with Yao Ting would cause trouble, so he found an excuse to take the baby away. The baby was premature and weak, had not received medical care, and was close to death. However, Yao Ting did not know, she believed that Lee Guangji would take good care of her child. It was not until she heard the news of the child's death that she fainted from horror. Lee Guangji did everything to deceive the police, making himself the first suspect. But all the physical evidence was not enough to prove that Lee Guangji committed the murder. As long as the family firmly admitted the crime, the possibility of him being convicted would be very low. Xiao Yang took a sip of water, looked at Lee Guangji's pale face and said, "What I admire most is how you bought a bone-chopping knife online that looked like the murder weapon, printed your fingerprints on it and threw it away. Even if you found the knife, you wouldn't be able to find Miao Qing's DNA. You," Lee Guangji laughed out loud, "comrade, you have a really rich imagination. You can think of such a shocking crime just by relying on words? Do you have evidence?" "Yes." Xiao Yang put down his cup and smiled. "What I admire most is that you used Meng Huiqing's account to buy the knife." Captain Gao said that as soon as Xiao Yang said this, Lee Guangji's expression immediately lost all expression. "You are very smart, knowing that if you use your account, you will be discovered immediately, so you used Meng Huiqing's identity to create a new account. You also know that whether it's you or the Yao family, throwing away clothes and murder weapons will always be risky. I have to praise this step. You put the cleaned blood-stained clothes and the real murder weapon at their house, then asked Yao Shangyuan and Meng Huiqing to wrap the murder weapon in the clothes and use the excuse that the goods were not the right model to send them back to the seller." Xiao Yang told Lee Guangji that our team had sent someone to intercept the package. Once the clothes and murder weapon were found, even after washing them, blood stains could still be detected. Faced with the undeniable evidence, Lee Guangji finally gave in, brushing away the photos on the table and repeatedly asserting, "Ting didn't do it on purpose, Ting was just sick, Ting didn't want to kill anyone." Hearing this, my back was drenched in cold sweat. Every police investigator would rely on the crime scene, evidence, witnesses, and simulate the criminal psychology to reimagine the events on the day of the murder. I have to praise this step. You put the cleaned blood-stained clothes and the real murder weapon at their house, then asked Yao Yuan and Meng Huiqin to wrap the murder weapon in the clothes and use the excuse that the goods were not the right model to send them back to the seller. Xiao Yang told Lee Guangji that our team had sent someone to intercept the package. Once the clothes and murder weapon were found, even after washing them, blood stains could still be detected. Faced with the undeniable evidence, Lee Guangji finally gave in, brushing away the photos on the table and repeatedly asserting, Ting Ting didn't do it on purpose, Ting Ting was just sick, Ting Ting didn't want to kill anyone. Hearing this, my back was drenched in cold sweat. Every police investigator would rely on the crime scene, evidence, witnesses, and simulate the criminal psychology to reimagine the events on the day of the murder. Yao Yuan and Meng Huiqin, who were also arrested, collapsed and admitted to assisting Lee Guangji, while covering for Yao Ting under pressure. I pushed open the interrogation room door, intending to invite Xiao Yang out to rest. Unexpectedly, Lee Guangji suddenly spoke up. He looked straight at Xiao Yang, with a look of disappointment because his plan had been exposed. Your name is Yang Rui, right? Yang, I don't mind dying. Tell me, when did you start suspecting Ting Ting? Xiao Yang thought for a moment. The only fingerprints found on the knife were yours, Yao Yuanxiang and Meng Huiqin. Lee Guangji sighed, angrily banging the table. I told them before, Ting Ting must touch that knife. Damn it, why didn't they listen to me? I glanced at Xiao Yang in confusion. He explained, the day we came, there was still uncut meat and green peppers on the chopping board. The kitchen knife was specially made. People who cook often don't usually cut meat and vegetables with one knife. If their skills are poor, then they obviously don't cook often. I suddenly understood. Since Lee Guangji didn't cook often, Yao Ting was definitely the one who cooked in the house. However, the bone knife didn't have her fingerprints, but only the prints of the two elders of the Yao family. This detail was really suspicious. I was about to praise Xiao Yang's careful observation, when he suddenly burst out laughing. Don't you feel a little more at ease? Lee Guangji replied, what are you talking about? When I said I suspected Yao Ting because of the knife, you breathed a sigh of relief. Xiao Yang looked at Lee Guangji with interest. In my opinion, he was like looking at a wild animal that had been hurt and pushed into a corner. I finally understand what you're thinking, ha ha ha. Xiao Yang laughed and shook his head, how ridiculous. Do you think that Yao Yuanxiang and Meng Huiqin ruined your plan? Do you think you can use selflessly protecting Yao Ting to gain a foothold in the Yao family? Do you want them to not only feel sorry for you, but also regret it for the rest of their lives? The hunt continued. Lee Guangji clenched his fists. What are you talking about? What regret and remorse? Are you acting? You're the one who's acting, or rather, playing a role. Xiao Yang took out a few photos of Miao Qing's body and a bag of evidence. In the bag was a piece of bark, taken from Lee Guangji's tire, which had previously been considered irrelevant evidence. You haven't seen Miao Qing's body, right? Her clothes were in disarray, but they were still neatly arranged. After the murderer cut open Miao Qing's abdomen, he fixed her clothes. Although the surgical technique was clumsy, the incision extended from the vagina upwards, to protect the fetus in her abdomen. Before she died, Miao Qing had taken sleeping pills. However, during the surgery, she woke up from the pain, but the murderer didn't stab her straight to death, because he was afraid that the fetus would lack oxygen after the mother died. Instead, the murderer used a silk scarf to strangle her, but accidentally deflected it, causing Miao Qing to die. This series of actions was not something a male murderer could do. I clearly saw Lee Guangji's facial muscles twitch. He tried to control his emotions. From the beginning, did you suspect Ting Ting? Why did you? Because you jumped in yourself. Xiao Yang pointed to the evidence bag and said, this piece of bark contains copper humate residue, a pesticide used to prevent fruit trees from rotting. In addition to being used to prevent disease, it is also used after hail, to protect broken branches. The neighbors saw you driving home at 10 a.m. on the 9th. Before that, you ran over the branches in your hurry to find Miao Ting. This only proves that I came to protect Ting Ting. Xiao Yang nodded. That's right, until you specifically placed those potted plants next to the coffee table, to attract our attention. I blurted out, were those potted plants intentional? Xiao Yang did not answer clearly, but continued to describe Lee Guangji's true nature. Even though no one knows that you shouldn't change the pot during the bud stage, you will still find a way for the police to discover the threads in the pot, because you need to monopolize suspicion so that you can paint an image of yourself as someone who is devoted to love. Xiao Yang was not a man of many words, but in the face of Lee Guangji's desperate struggle, he dispelled all doubts, forcing them into Lee Guangji's mind, forcing him to admit. Even if they agreed to let you marry Yao Ting, the Yao family has never considered you as a member of the family. There is a family photo hanging in the house, you are not in it. Xiao Yang paused, looking straight at Lee Guangji. Your relationship with them is also bad, right? Meng Huiqing cares so much about her daughter, but she doesn't even know that she is pregnant. It is obvious that they are not very close. And that is because Yao Yuanxiang despises you. The word despise struck Lee Guangji's pride like a knife. He gritted his teeth and looked at Xiao Yang with eyes that seemed to want to tear him apart. Why do you say he looks down on me? Why does he look down on me? You're not married and have a daughter, but you rely on your wife's family to buy a car and a house. You caused an accident while driving drunk, causing your wife to miscarry and your daughter to die. You were fired from the civil service, and by the age of 30 you were just a real estate consultant. When negotiating, you even had to entertain clients yourself. If it were me, I would look down on you too, Xiao Yang said calmly. What did you say? Lee Guangji shouted angrily, do you know that day, Ting Ting was the one who convinced me to drive? If it weren't for me, Ting Ting would have committed suicide after learning that she had a miscarriage. If it weren't for me, she would have suffered in silence, and would have lost her life. If it weren't for me, she would have been in jail long ago. It's all because of me. I love her too much. I can endure all the contemptuous looks from her family. I don't mind sacrificing my own future. It's not a sacrifice, it's just a fair exchange. Xiao Yang slowly packed up the photos and evidence bag. The plan succeeded, you were acquitted, the Yao family will look at you differently, and there's also evidence of Yao Ting's crime. Yao Yuanxiang may despise you, but he won't dare let Yao Ting divorce you. The plan failed, you can still rely on Yao Yuanxiang and Meng Huiqing, the two parents who always protect their daughter. Even if they were forced to leave fingerprints on the knife, they would avoid directly implicating their daughter in the murder. You will be a good husband who protects his wife, and will not be imprisoned for too long. Stopping there, he looked straight at Lee Guangji and gave a cold smile. Tell me, if they know you used Yao Ting as a bargaining chip, will she still love you? Will you be able to take the Yao family's assets? Lee Guangji felt like he had been hit hard, collapsing onto the chair, his eyes dull. When Xiao Yang and I left the interrogation room, a cold wind blew through the hallway. I shivered and blurted out, you knew the truth from the beginning, right? Xiao Yang just nodded, returning to his usual calm demeanor. I was mesmerized. If Xiao Yang knew everything, as long as he reported and collected evidence, we could have convicted him immediately. But he didn't do that. He carefully hid the clues, the humate, the meat and vegetables on the chopping board. If he didn't need other help to intercept the package, he would probably complete his knife-for-knife plan on his own. Lee Guangji used Yao Ting as a bargaining chip, while Xiao Yang used us as a bargaining chip to manipulate him. Finally, I couldn't help but ask, you said you wanted to know why Lee Guangji did that, not because of his guilt, but because, why did he put out those flower pots like that? Xiao Yang smiled, character is really interesting, isn't it, brother he? I also didn't understand what character meant. All I knew was that, like Lee Guangji, he liked the feeling of being in control of everything. After the case was closed, Captain Gao and Xiao Yang chatted in the office all afternoon. No one knew what they were talking about. I took the opportunity to report the developments of the case and went in to eavesdrop. When I opened the door, I heard Captain Gao ask, "Do you know anything about medicine?" Xiao Yang sat opposite, smiling and replied, "Family reasons, I know a little." Within 2 minutes, I saw Captain Chao getting angry. After that, I never saw Xiao Yang act so fierce, bloodthirsty, and primitive like a predator. But I always felt lucky that Xiao Yang was a police officer. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Please check important information.